What if one touch could steal your entire world? On a quiet morning beneath open skies, a billionaire's daughter kneels at her mother's grave, grieving, broken, and unaware that her life is about to change forever. The moment her fingers touch the cold earth, sound vanishes, her voice disappears, and silence becomes her prison. Doctors fail. Money means nothing. Power can't buy answers. But when hope is almost gone, a forgotten man on the streets, poor, ignored, and unheard, becomes the key to a miracle no one saw coming. This is not just a story about loss. It's about silence, healing, and the unexpected soul who teaches a broken heart how to speak again. The day silence came did not announce itself with thunder or sirens. It arrived quietly, on a morning that smelled like cut grass and fresh coffee, on a hill where the city thinned into trees and stone. Eleanor Whitmore stepped out of her father's black sedan and felt the world pause. The cemetery stretched before her in gentle rows, white and gray headstones resting like folded wings on green earth. Sunlight filtered through tall oaks, dappling the path with gold. Somewhere far off, a bell rang soft, almost polite, marking the hour. Eleanor was 16 years old, the only daughter of Victor Whitmore, a man whose name was carved into glass towers and spoken in boardrooms across America. She wore a simple navy dress, nothing flashy, nothing that matched the wealth surrounding her life. Her dark hair was braided loosely down her back, and her hands trembled as she clasped them together. Today marked 1 year since her mother died. Not 1 year since the funeral. 1 year since Eleanor's world broke. "Take your time," her father said gently behind her. Victor Whitmore rarely spoke gently. He was known for his decisive voice, his firm handshakes, his ability to silence a room with a single look. But today, his words were fragile, as though he feared they might shatter if spoken too loudly. Eleanor nodded but did not turn around. She had dreamed of this moment all week, the walk to the grave, the flowers she would place, the words she would whisper. In her dreams, she spoke easily. She told her mother about school, about how she'd learned to drive, about how the house still smelled faintly of lavender because Eleanor refused to let the staff change the cleaning supplies. In her dreams, her mother listened. Now, standing at the edge of the path, Eleanor felt something tighten in her chest. The world seemed thinner. The sounds of the city, cars, voices, distant construction felt far away, muffled as though wrapped in cotton. She told herself it was only nerves. Grief had strange habits. It made time bend. It made memory heavy. She took a step forward. The headstone came into view. Maria Whitmore, beloved wife, devoted mother, your love still guides us home. Eleanor's breath caught. Her mother's smile flashed in her mind, warm, patient, the kind that made strangers feel like family. Maria Whitmore had been nothing like the woman magazines tried to paint her as. She wasn't the billionaire's elegant wife. She was a former schoolteacher who believed kindness was a language everyone understood. Eleanor knelt slowly. The marble was cool beneath her fingertips. "I'm here," Eleanor whispered. The words sounded strange in the open air, as if the earth itself leaned closer to hear. Victor stayed several steps back, giving his daughter space. He watched her shoulders rise and fall, watched the way she pressed her palm flat against the stone. As though grounding herself, Eleanor closed her eyes. "I miss you," she said. "I try to be brave like you told me. I really do." A breeze stirred the leaves overhead. For a moment, Eleanor imagined it was her mother answering. She smiled weakly. Then her hand slipped. It wasn't dramatic. No sudden force. No lightning in the sky. Her fingers slid from the smooth marble inscription down to the soil at the base of the grave, dark, freshly tended earth. The instant her skin touched the ground, something changed. It felt like a door slammed shut inside her. A sharp pressure rushed through her ears, then vanished, replaced by a hollow stillness so complete it frightened her. Eleanor gasped, but the sound seemed to disappear before reaching her own mind. She opened her eyes. The world looked the same, but it felt wrong. "Dad," she said. No sound reached her. Eleanor frowned and tried again, louder. Dad. Nothing. Panic fluttered in her chest. She clapped her hands together sharply. She felt the impact. She heard nothing. Her heart began to race. Eleanor turned around quickly, mouth moving as she called for her father. But Victor only noticed because he was watching her lips. He saw the fear bloom across her face, saw her stand abruptly, swaying. "Eleanor," he said, stepping forward. She didn't respond. Victor stopped. "Eleanor," he repeated, louder. She stared at him, eyes wide, shaking her head, as though she couldn't understand what was happening. Her mouth opened, forming words that never arrived. Her knees buckled. Victor rushed to her, catching her just before she fell. He held her tightly, calling her name, his voice breaking through the quiet air. Eleanor felt the vibration of his chest as he spoke, felt his arms around her. But the world had gone silent, and when she tried to speak, tried with everything inside her, no sound came out. Not a whisper, not a breath, only silence. Doctors filled the following weeks. Specialists from New York, Boston, Chicago, some flown in privately, others arriving with briefcases full of charts and confidence. Eleanor was examined, tested, scanned. Her ears were healthy, her vocal cords intact. Her brain showed no signs of injury. "It doesn't make sense," one neurologist admitted, rubbing his temples. "Physically, she should be able to hear and speak." Victor slammed his fist on the polished table. "Then why can't she?" No one had an answer. Eleanor sat quietly in room after room, watching lips move, reading faces, feeling like a visitor in her own life. She learned quickly how exhausting silence could be. How lonely it felt to watch laughter without hearing it. How terrifying it was to scream inside your chest and have no one know. They gave it a name: sudden functional mutism and hearing loss, a phrase that sounded important but explained nothing. At night, Eleanor lay awake in her childhood bedroom, staring at the ceiling stars her mother had glued there years ago. She pressed her hands over her ears, then against her throat, trying to will sound back into existence. Nothing. Tears soaked her pillow silently. Victor spared no expense. Therapists came. Counselors tried to help her process unresolved grief. Speech therapists encouraged her gently, praising her effort even when no sound emerged. The house, once warm and full of life, became painfully quiet. Not because Eleanor couldn't hear, but because no one knew how to speak to her anymore. Staff avoided her eyes. Friends stopped visiting. Classmates sent messages at first, then slowly drifted away when Eleanor didn't reply. They didn't understand that she could read, could type, but every message reminded her of what she'd lost. Weeks turned into months. The tabloids noticed. Billionaire's daughter struck by mysterious illness. Tragedy follows. Whitmore family again. Victor tried to shield Eleanor from it, but she saw the headlines anyway. Saw herself turned into a story. A puzzle. A rumor. She stopped going outside, until the day she ran away. It happened on a gray afternoon when the house felt too large and her chest felt too tight. Eleanor slipped out through the side gate, wearing a hoodie and jeans, her hair tucked under a cap. No bodyguards noticed until she was already blocks away. She walked with no destination, following sidewalks that led from quiet neighborhoods into busier streets. She watched people talk on phones, argue, laugh. Soundless scenes unfolding around her. At a downtown intersection, she noticed him. He sat on the curb near a closed bookstore, a cardboard sign resting against his knee. "Anything helps. God bless." His clothes were worn but clean. His beard was streaked with gray, his eyes alert and kind. He wasn't shouting or waving the sign, just sitting, patient, as though he understood the rhythm of waiting. Eleanor slowed. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way he watched the crowd, not with bitterness, but with quiet understanding. Or maybe it was the way he smiled at a passing child who waved at him. Something tugged at her. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded bill. As she stepped closer, the man looked up. Their eyes met. He frowned slightly, not in suspicion, but recognition. "Hello there," he said. Eleanor heard nothing, but she saw his lips move, saw the warmth in his expression. She held out the money. He didn't take it immediately. Instead, he tilted his head gently and asked, "Are you okay?" Eleanor swallowed hard. She shook her head. The man studied her face, then nodded slowly, as if understanding something deeper than words. He took the bill carefully, then surprised her by placing it back into her hand. "Keep it," he said softly. "You look like you need more than I do today." Eleanor's breath hitched. She tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to say thank you. No sound came. Tears welled up, spilling over as frustration and grief collided inside her. She covered her mouth, shaking. The man stood. Up close, Eleanor noticed the lines on his face, the calm strength in his posture. He knelt slightly to be at her eye level, careful not to crowd her. "It's all right," he said gently. "You don't have to talk." She stared at him, stunned. He pointed lightly to his ear, then to his mouth, then crossed his hands over his chest. "Sometimes," he said, slowly, "silence carries its own story." Eleanor felt something shift inside her. For the first time since the cemetery, she didn't feel invisible. A police siren flashed in the distance. She didn't hear it, but she saw people turn. The man glanced toward the street, then back at her. "They'll be looking for you," he said. "Someone always is." He stepped back, giving her space, and smiled a sad, knowing smile. "Go home," he said. Eleanor clutched the bill to her chest, nodding. As she turned to leave, she looked back once more. The man was already sitting again, his sign resting against his knee, eyes lifted toward the sky, as if listening to something only he could hear. Eleanor walked away, unaware that she had just met the one person who would change everything, and that the silence she carried was not a curse but a doorway. Silence did not leave Eleanor Whitmore all at once. It lingered, like a cautious guest, watching to see whether it was still welcome. In the days after she met the man on the street, Eleanor returned home quietly. No headlines followed her disappearance. Victor had made sure of that. Relief flooded his face when she stepped through the door, but guilt followed soon after. He hugged her tightly, whispering words she could not hear. Apologies she could only read in his eyes. Yet something inside Eleanor had changed. For the first time since the cemetery, the silence felt less heavy. She began to write. At first, it was only a notebook she kept under her pillow. She filled it with thoughts she had never been able to say out loud about her mother, about the loneliness of being surrounded by people who didn't know how to see her anymore, about the strange comfort she felt in quiet moments. Words flowed easily onto paper, even when they refused to leave her mouth. Victor noticed the change. She began leaving her room more often. She sat at the breakfast table again, scribbling notes to communicate. She even smiled small, fragile smiles, but real ones. Still, the silence remained. Weeks later, Eleanor found herself thinking about the man again. The poor beggar. She didn't know his name, didn't know where he slept, or how long he'd lived on that street. Yet, his face returned to her thoughts in quiet moments, his calm eyes, the way he spoke without pity, the way he saw her without needing her voice. One afternoon, Eleanor did something unexpected. She asked to go back. Victor was hesitant. The security team objected immediately. "It's not safe," they insisted. She could be recognized. Eleanor wrote slowly on her tablet, her hand steady. "I need to see him." Victor read the words twice. "Why?" he asked gently. Eleanor paused, then typed again. "Because he didn't try to fix me. He just listened." Victor exhaled deeply. Sometimes, love meant stepping aside, even when fear screamed otherwise. They went the next day. Eleanor wore simple clothes again. No cameras, no announcements, just a father and daughter walking down a familiar street. The spot near the closed bookstore was empty. Eleanor's heart sank. She scanned the sidewalks, her eyes searching faces. Panic rose quietly inside her chest, threatening to undo the fragile peace she'd found. Then she saw him. He sat beneath the shade of a bus stop several yards away, his cardboard sign resting against his side. He looked thinner than before, his jacket worn at the elbows. When he noticed her, his eyes widened. A slow smile spread across his face. You came back, he said. Eleanor felt the vibration of his voice through the air, though she heard nothing. She nodded quickly, her eyes shining. He stood, brushing dust from his pants. I hoped you would, he said softly. Victor watched from a short distance away, unsure whether to intervene. Something in the way Eleanor stood, confident, grounded, made him stay where he was. The man gestured toward the bench. Sit, he said. Eleanor sat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then the man tapped his chest gently. My name is Samuel, Eleanor pointed to herself. Then wrote on her tablet, Eleanor. Samuel nodded. A beautiful name. He glanced at the tablet, then back at her face. You don't hear, do you? She shook her head. And you don't speak, he added gently. She shook her head again. Samuel didn't look sad. He didn't look shocked. Instead, he smiled. Good, he said. Eleanor blinked, confused. Because, Samuel continued, the world is loud. And sometimes you can hear the truth better when everything else goes quiet. Eleanor felt warmth spread through her chest. They met again the next day. And the day after that, Samuel never asked about her past, never questioned her silence. Instead, he shared stories about growing up in a small town, about losing his family during hard times, about how life had taken turns he never planned. Eleanor listened with her eyes, with her heart. She learned to read his expressions, the pauses between his words. She laughed soundless, but full, and Samuel laughed with her. Slowly, something remarkable happened. Eleanor stopped fighting the silence. And in that acceptance, something began to stir. One evening, Eleanor dreamed of her mother. They were in the old kitchen. Sunlight spilling across the counter. Maria Whitmore stood by the sink, drying dishes, humming softly. In the dream, Eleanor could hear it. The hum, clear and gentle. Her mother turned and smiled. You don't have to be afraid anymore, she said. Eleanor woke with tears on her face, and for the first time in months, she felt sound not in her ears, but deep inside her chest, like a distant echo waiting to be answered. It happened on a quiet afternoon. Samuel was speaking about forgiveness, about how holding pain too tightly could keep you trapped longer than silence ever could. Eleanor's chest tightened. Her hands trembled. She raised one hand to her throat. Samuel noticed immediately. He stopped talking. Eleanor, he said carefully. She opened her mouth. At first, nothing came. Then, a breath. A sound. Soft, broken, barely there. Samuel froze. His eyes filled with tears. Samuel, she finished. The word trembling but real. The world did not explode. No music played. No crowd gathered. But silence shifted. Eleanor gasped, clutching her throat, her eyes wide with disbelief. She laughed, and this time, sound followed. Uneven, raw, beautiful. Samuel dropped to his knees, pressing his hands together. Thank you, he whispered, not to her, but to something greater. Over the next days, Eleanor's hearing returned slowly, like a sunrise stretching across the horizon. Sounds arrived one by one, the rustle of leaves, the murmur of traffic, her father's voice breaking when she said, Dad, for the first time. Doctors were stunned. They called it spontaneous recovery. Victor called it a miracle. Eleanor knew the truth was quieter than that. It was healing. Eleanor never forgot Samuel. She made sure he never slept on the street again. She funded shelters, education programs, and quiet spaces for people the world had stopped listening to. But more importantly, she visited Samuel often. They sat together, sometimes talking, sometimes not. Because they both understood something rare. That silence was not emptiness. It was a teacher. And sometimes, the people with the least were the ones who knew how to give the most. Eleanor visited her mother's grave one final time that year. She placed her hand gently on the stone. This time, nothing disappeared. Instead, Eleanor smiled and whispered, I'm okay now. The wind stirred the leaves. And for the first time, silence answered back, not as a curse, but as peace. Silence took her voice, but it gave her something far greater. Eleanor learned that healing doesn't always come from wealth, power, or answers. It comes from connection, patience, and the people the world often overlooks. A grieving daughter was restored not by money, but by kindness, not by noise, but by understanding. Now the question is yours. If you met someone like Samuel today, would you listen? Or would you walk past? If this story touched your heart, kindly hit the subscription button on your screen and let us know where you are watching from. And please don't keep it to yourself, like this story, to help it reach more souls. Share it with someone who believes miracles can still happen. Comment below. Do you think silence can sometimes heal better than words? Your voice might be the one someone else needs to hear.